President Biden gave a speech in Michigan today at the facility of a semiconductor chip manufacturer. The president claims his economic plan is leading to a manufacturing boom in America, and it is actually growing our economy. Is that true? Joining me now to discuss this and more is economist Stephen Moore. He is a senior fellow at the FreedomWorks and co-founder of the Committee to Unleash Prosperity. Stephen, welcome back to the program.
Hi, Tony.
So is the president's economic plan working?
Well, we did have a manufacturing renaissance in America in 2017 and 2018 and 2019 until COVID hit, and that was under Donald Trump with his reduction in regulations on American businesses. And we did the big reduction in the business tax rates, which brought a lot of capital and jobs back to the United States. Remember, Tony, under Trump, for the first time in 50 years, we actually had companies moving from Mexico to Michigan rather than the other way around. Now, we have had a recapturing of manufacturing jobs under Biden, but that's simply the jobs that were lost because of the lockdowns during COVID. We're way below where we should be. And let's not forget, Tony, that you were talking about the energy situation. Those are effectively, blue collar manufacturing jobs in the oil patch. And we have a president who has basically declared war on American energy. I love that clip that you played from the White House saying, oh, we have 9,000 permits that aren't being taken. The reason that nobody's drilling on those permits is because the Biden administration has basically threatened to kill all of the development. They've created so many environmental regulations against drilling that no one in their right mind would take Biden up on that deal. I call it you were talking about disrespect. This is the Disrespect for American Jobs Act.
Also, correct me if I'm wrong, but the administration leaning on the financial industry not to make capital available to those in the energy business.
Good point, Tony. You're exactly right. This is this ESG trend, which is diverting capital away from our oil and gas and coal industry. And I want to make sure that your viewers understand, I think most of them do, but I don't think people in Washington, D.C. understand this, that about 70% of our energy that we use, the computer that I'm on right now, the telephones we use, the food that we eat, the transportation, it's all derived of energy. And 70% of that, Tony, in America comes from old-fashioned fossil fuels. Those are what really created the industrialization of America. This war on American fossil fuels, I think, is extraordinarily dangerous. And I agree with what you were saying earlier, that it's almost unpatriotic what the president is doing and saying, yes, you can drill in Venezuela, which is headed by a criminal dictator who's a socialist, but you can't drill in Texas and Oklahoma and Alaska. Does that make any sense? Not to me.
No, can you explain that to me? Why are we going and propping up a socialist dictator when we can be creating jobs? As you talked about, blue collar, good paying jobs. I worked in the oil field when I was in high school in Oklahoma, where I grew up. This is good for America in so many different ways. Why would we go to Venezuela?
I wish I had a good answer for that, Tony, because it just defies explanation. Now, the Biden administration is saying that this evil regime under Maduro is going to somehow behave itself and it's going to improve its human rights record as a part of this bargain. Do you believe that, Tony? I mean, this is an evil regime.
No, I don't believe it at all, because I didn't believe it, 25 years ago when they said that about China, because we've seen how that played out.
Yeah, so I think that, the problem with liberals is that they believe what they want to believe, not believe reality, and so the reality is you see that these countries always violate these promises. Venezuela has some of the worst human rights violations in the world. I mean, Tony, they are starving to death their own people. My God, that's the greatest human rights violation on the planet right now. So the idea that Maduro is some kind of this tiger is going to change his stripes, I don't see it happening. And I think this is basically almost a penance that we have to pay for being a rich country. Remember, just a week and a half ago, Biden went to the Middle East and told these other countries, the United States is going to pay reparations. That's the word he turned. We have to pay reparations to the rest of the world for our using fossil fuels. Wait a minute. We provided $500 billion, Tony, of foreign aid to the rest of the world, and we owe them money? I mean, it's absurd.
Yeah, it clearly is. It makes no sense. I want to go to another topic that I think could have the president in a bind. He's calling on Congress to block a strike by more than 100,000 union members at the nation's freight railroads, which is set to take place, I think, on the 9th of December if an agreement is not reached. I mean, the president himself, he's the union president, but now he knows what this will do to the economy, about $2 billion blow per day if there is a rail strike.
And you may recall, Tony, that about 3 weeks before the election, he had a big press conference, remember, in front of the White House, I think it was in the Rose Garden, saying, oh, we've reached a deal and this whole problem has been resolved. Well, there was no real deal. It was just to kick the can past the election day. Isn't that suspicious that about a week after the election, all of a sudden this issue reemerged? I don't think they're really close to a deal. I think it's irresponsible. I mean, look, nobody wants a strike. It would cause havoc for our economy. But on the other hand, why should Congress intervene? I thought the president and Pete Buttigieg, the transportation secretary, had solved this problem. And here we are 6 months later during Christmas season when so much packages are sent out and there's so much commerce flowing. Rail strike would be disaster. But Marco Rubio put out a good statement today saying, wait a minute, this isn't something Congress should intervene in. This is something that should be the management of the railroads and the workers, and the president should try to broker this deal, but not Congress.
It looks like that's not going to happen. But of course, this will happen in a lame duck session of Congress. And so the Democrats, they have control of the House. They don't completely have control of the Senate. But do you think this is something that makes its way through with Republican support?
Hard to say. There's going to be, the president basically has put the onus on Congress here. As I mentioned, Marco Rubio said, well, wait a minute, this deal might not be fair to the workers. I mean, and remember, Tony, the reason we're seeing this kind of labor strife right now and a growing number of strikes is because workers are facing a lot of financial stress because of Biden inflation. Remember, we only had 1.5% inflation under Trump. Now we got 8.5% inflation. That's killing workers' wages.
Right. All of this shows us just how fragile our supply chain and our economy is. It does not work unless the American people have confidence in it. And all of these pieces, it's the invisible hand that Adam Smith talked about, where all of these pieces just work together because people are pursuing, in part their own interest. But when government gets involved, it just kind of throws everything off kilter.
Yeah, and I'll just, add one other point that, we did a study at the Committee to Unleash Prosperity a month or two ago where we showed that none of the people in the Biden administration, very few, most of them do not have any business experience. So they don't know how to deal with a crisis like this. They're just a bunch of left-wing ideologues. They're college professors, they're community activists, they're lawyers. They don't know anything about how to deal with a crisis like this. And it's a dangerous situation for our country right now that we have such poor leadership in Washington.
Yeah, it would be better if they would just all go home and let the economy run itself. Stephen Moore, always great to see you. Thanks so much for joining us today.
Thank you, Tony.